Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So this is a bonus episode, a special edition for the book club. So today we have Dennis, and I'm thinking about the best way to describe this individual, but I'm going to let him do. You gotta love tech, man. So the floor is yours, man. Why don't you tell audience a little bit more about you and what we're talking about today?
I'm Dennis Devlin. I'm the founder and CEO of Clarity Research and Strategy, which is a um, marketing and branding research and strategy firm. Started it almost 13 years ago.
Hmm.
Um, and I work with business and agency owners, as well as marketing and branding leaders to help them gain clarity about their customer, about their competition and market, and their brand in order to help them become more effective at their strategy and grow.
So, I mean, obviously, this is not your first rodeo show to publishing a book. So, like, just talk about your first book versus the second book.
Right. Well, I think the first book is a good book,
Hmm.
but I think the second book is a better book. So the first book was really uh, called Overcoming the Innovation Killers, and it is a book that's really targeted to a very niche audience. It's really focused on innovation teams at consumer product manufacturers, really sharing with them how research can help them overcome different barriers that they typically find in developing new products in the marketplace. And it really started, the whole idea of writing a book on it really started actually with an effort to market to that audience, that particular target. Actually started my co-author Jeff Jones and I started by putting together a sales pitch deck, and we were maybe halfway through it, if that, and realized there's probably a book here, and it just happened to be the case where Jeff had written a book on his own previously, so he had a lot of the processes down, a lot of logistics. He knew a lot of how to make that happen, and so we just kind of changed our approach and went with the book. The idea was to utilize the book as a way to introduce ourselves and gain some credibility for that audience. That was really the first effort together. Um, Three Wise Monkeys, the most recent book that just came out in July, is one that's really more broad in terms of its target. It is for those business and agency owners. It's for those marketing and branding leaders that I made a reference to earlier.
Hmm.
It's really our audience for the business. Um, and it came out of an idea that I'd had really when I started the business, 13, almost 13 years ago. It's really based on this idea of developing a culture, what we refer to as a culture of clarity in an organization. So it's really about focusing the entire organization, or even a department or division, perhaps, on really utilizing research and insights to understand who they're supporting,
Hmm.
and and making it kind of inherent within the organization. So a lot of focus, obviously, with regard to culture development, is about hiring the right people, about promoting the right people, incentivizing the right people, giving them, empowering them to do really good work, So the book is focused on what you need to do to generate this culture within your organization. And this is an idea I've had for some time. But foundationally, it's about elevating the importance of research and insights in your organization.
So, I mean, obviously with that, I mean, you're talking about definitions inside the book, and like that was one of the things that I noticed about when I was reading the book and listening to the audiobook, is that you guys kind of really made it educational in the sense that you would stop in the middle of an actual paragraph and then define the
Right.
definition of what that word is. So I want to talk about that. I mean, obviously most books don't do that. So why was that something that you chose to do in this book and thought that you had to define these particular words?
Right. So we're utilizing different terminology than maybe some people would think of if they were just to read the words on their own. We're trying to provide them a certain context in which to think about it within this idea of this culture of clarity. And so we did feel it was really important to help the reader follow along with what we were saying so they would understand its importance
Mm.
and how the different terminology kind of related to one another. So yes, we do with throughout the book, we have defined a lot of terms in an effort to really clarify what we mean by them so they have a better understanding of what we're sharing.
So I mean, with that, I mean, I think most people, if they really know you, they'll know that you're into comedy, you're into improv, and I think this is where this other section comes from in this book. I mean, besides the cover, and we'll get to that, but the music references. I mean, that's another thing that's very consistent throughout the book, and you have several different music genres and several different music references in there. Whose idea or concept was that?
Um, I can't say that I know for sure whether it was Jeff or myself. In our first book, we used quotes that seemed appropriate for that particular chapter in the book. This time we decided, I'd say it was probably a pretty joint decision to go with different titles of songs or lines from songs, just to capture sort of the essence from an artistic perspective of what that chapter was about.
Hmm. I think it's definitely interesting. And so, obviously, every time I interview someone, whether it's about the book or whether it's about them, I kind of dive into their psyche and dive into their history a little bit. So, diving into your background, come to find out that your wife, she kind of specialized in English to a certain extent as well. So, did she have any hearsay? Did she have any editing going on with the book as well behind the scenes?
No, she had really no involvement whatsoever in the book, at least not directly. Right. I mean, she allowed me to spend a lot of time working on it, that's for sure. But no, her background's in learning development. And so she works with clients to develop online courses. Typically, they're training related. So she works with a lot of folks that are in training departments at large companies, sometimes HR people, sometimes sales.
Hmm.
Anyone who needs to, typically within their company, they need to train some people on processes or products, et cetera. That's really where her work is involved.
I think it's very cool. I mean, 'cause you guys I look at you guys as the power couple. I mean, you guys have been married for like what, roughly 30 something years, and you've been in the
Yes.
game for a long period of time. So, I mean, both of you guys have the business savviness. So it kind of leads me to like the next side of you, like the sense of humor. Like you have to kind of explain the cover. Now, obviously, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil is something that traditionally we've always heard, but I could see that you had a little bit of sense of humor when you developed this cover a little bit.
Yeah, so the title was my idea. Well, the idea of utilizing three wise monkeys and that Japanese axiom is was my idea. Now, I actually had a suggestion from a colleague of mine to leverage that and put it in the title itself. So I will give credit to my friend and colleague Steve McCullough for that. But the idea of utilizing three wise monkeys was, I tell you, essay, I don't have brilliant moments very often, but I felt like this might have been one of those few that I had. I was thinking about how we were organizing the book and the main concepts of the book, and it dawned on me that we could utilize the three wise monkeys as a framework to think about the different concepts in the book. And so, as someone who's read the book, you get a sense for, you got a sense for how we utilize it. But um, to kind of utilize that in a way that just made it sort of more concrete and easier for people to get a grasp of. What I've been surprised by with the book since it's come out in July has been just how many people have told us that they really understand the three wise monkeys more so than I expected. I really felt like some people would get it and some people wouldn't. So we were taking a little bit, felt like we were taking a little bit of a risk by putting it in the title. But it's intriguing, right? We really did it mostly in terms of putting it in the title, was more about the fact that we thought it would be something that people would find compelling and wonder what's that about. Our original title had something to do with creating a culture of clarity, which we still have as part of the subtitle. That's where the business book aspect kind of comes in. But there is a little bit of, there is a tinge, I think, of comedic intent with utilizing three wise monkeys. I do want to just briefly mention, I've had people tell me since the book's come out, Dennis, that you're going to be associated with these three wise monkeys from now on, the rest of your career. And I said, well, I'm okay with that. They are wise. They're not stupid monkeys, right? They're wise monkeys. But what I've come to realize is now that I'm in the monkey business. But I'm really happy that we did make that decision. It helps to be memorable, as you know, in the marketplace, and being associated with that, that pretty well-known concept I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that.
Well, I say this because I'm also a Sagittarius as well. So, obviously, being a Sagittarius, and believe it or not, our birthdays are 2 days apart, is that naturally we're smartasses. Like by default, we could be the most serious person, and in the drop of a dime, we could be a complete smartass in a good way, right? Humorous, right? So, what were you about to say?
No, I'm in agreement.
So, just crack open the spine of the book, right? And I think the first set of chapters were essentially talking about hear no evil, and it was a reference in there about Henry Ford listening to his customers, and you also talked about Blockbuster not listening to their customers, hence why Netflix kind of took over the industry. So, like, just talk
Right.
about the not being able to hear the evil or to really listen to your customers.
Right. So, yeah, I think fundamentally, if we're going to be successful in our business, we have to start by really listening very deeply to what customers have to say, and sometimes what they don't say. It is critically important in my view, and just you, and that's what we're trying to convey in the book. First and foremost is that. If you aren't listening, you're probably not going to be providing the right product or service to those you're trying to serve. You need to include them in the development of products and services to get feedback through the different iterations of product and service development. You're going to limit yourself in terms of your potential if you don't keep listening to your customers.
I think it's definitely interesting because on one hand, in the beginning of the book, you were talking about customers and you're talking about not being able to hear the evil, and then like moving into like chapters 5 and 6, you started talking about seeing no evil and understanding that the competition blindness. So I want you to kind of you're really good at defining words, so I want you to kind of define the competition blindness in regards to what you were talking about.
Right. So when we're talking about the competition, you've got to recognize really who are you competing against. If you're not paying attention to what others are doing in the marketplace, they very well could be just kind of outsmarting you. by providing a better solution to who you're trying to serve. So you need to be paying attention. If you're not paying attention, if you're not seeing what others are doing and what the market is asking for, you're going to be left behind. You're not going to be the first in terms of being successful in a particular product or service need. You're always going to be a follower instead of a leader.
It's interesting because I think at the end of it was probably after chapter 6 or chapter 7. It was a quote in there that was pretty interesting, right? It was seeing is believing, so seeing through the customer's eyes is the truth. So, like, where does that quote? Did one of you guys write the quote? Did it stem from something? Like, how did you come up with that?
Well, I think that we have to get out of our marketing heads or branding heads when we're really trying to serve the target that we're looking to serve. There's a tendency, I think, in the business world and particularly in the marketing space, I think, or branding space, is we think like a marketer, we think like a brand manager, and that we start utilizing terminology, for example, that only we understand. That's not where the customer is. That we have to try to get in their heads. We need to see what they see in terms of they typically have a problem they need to solve. We call it a job they're trying to do. Maybe it's brushing their teeth on. I think there was an example, if I recall correctly, we put in the book about how Procter & Gamble in Asia was looking to find a product that could help with your dental care without water, so that people in Asia, while being maybe dealing with transit, how could they have good oral care? We have to, as marketers and branding people, we need to get in the minds of these people. We need to see the world as they see it, in order to be able to be effective with regard to the products and services that we put out there. So you have to kind of put yourself in that place, see the world as they see it, in order to get more aligned with what their needs really are and how we can serve them as marketers and brand managers.
So it's pretty interesting. Obviously you're talking about being a marketer, you're talking about being a brander, and obviously you and I, we talk that same language. So obviously your brand clarity, right? So it kind of goes to a self-defined thing about having a brand that's clear. I want you to kind of talk to that for a minute. Like, how did you come up with that name for your company? Is it stemming from clarity of branding, or where did that come from?
Yeah. So when I started the business, and I mentioned this, I think, early on, that it's been almost 13 years. I was looking at 3 different ideas that I felt the business was about insights, about understanding, and about knowledge. And when you're thinking, sometimes when you're developing a name, things like a thesaurus can really come in handy. And so when I was generating the name, I really wanted to have all those 3 ideas sort of included in some way. And what I found was, for all 3 of those words, the word clarity was included. And I thought about what I really look to deliver to my clients on a consistent basis. And it is about clarity. It is the essence of the brand that I had intended to convey to those I serve from the outset. We've got research and strategy. That's our how do we do it. That's how we bring the clarity to our clients. But what is it in terms of what the outcome is? Any kind of engagement that someone has with my business and with me, the intent is always about providing greater clarity for them. Do they have an issue with the customers and understanding customers? I'm going to be focused on helping them gain clarity there. If it's about the competition, their market, what are the possibilities? We'll focus there. Or is it about the brand? Maybe they aren't really sure what perceptions there are about their brand in the marketplace. marketplace. I can focus there. So the name generated from those three ideas, three concepts, and how could I include all three of them together? I've been happy with that choice since I started the business, because I think it speaks very quickly, and I hope clearly to really what I'm looking to deliver to my clients on a consistent basis.
So that leads me to like my next question. I mean, obviously you have a brand, right? And again, branders always think I'm going to brand literally everything based upon the core brand. And you've done that by putting the name of the company in the subtitle of the book. But the reality is that the front cover of the book does not essentially match your brand. So do you think that you have done yourself a disservice in the beginning, or were you playing with the psychological aspect to kind of pull people in and then show them the clarity once they get past the cover?
So it is the latter. It is the latter. So the brand colors are included in the book. It's based on a turquoise and blue are the primary and secondary colors of the brand. So that was intentional. We wanted to have the brand colors included. We really wanted to, from a branding standpoint, yeah, we didn't want to stick it in people's faces, so to speak.
Mhm.
And so we kind of pulled away a little bit from that. We do talk about a culture of clarity. That's where the connection comes in from a copy or verbal, wording standpoint. But yeah, we didn't want to, slap them in the face about clarity right off the bat. But we speak about it, really throughout the book, and we're pretty upfront about it. In the prologue and in the epilogue, we're pretty clear, I think, about the fact that, hey, this is about elevating research and insights.
Mhm.
And in the back, that's up front, and then at the very end, in the epilogue, we speak to, hey, we in order to help, we're here, we're here for you. If you so choose us, or if you choose someone else, make sure that they can really help you. But yeah, I think I didn't want it to be a book that was just sell my business. We're both Jeff and I are very take the approach that we wanted the books to be very practical. We want people to see our way of thinking. So we developed frameworks for the books. We share the frameworks right on the back cover of the book. How the book is laid out. We have a sort of like a book at a glance kind of visual that we include on the back cover, so people can kind of follow very easily. We also try to be as I'm sure you realize, it's not a very long book. That was intentional as well. We want to stick to what we think is really going to be helpful and not have a lot of superfluous information in there. But yeah, we want it to be something that's helpful, that people actually find value in it. But ultimately, I think we are pretty clear that we believe, and we had indicated that, I think, in the book, that we do believe that insights and research, building this sort of culture of clarity, can have very significant bottom line results. It can help build business, help a business grow, but you have to be committed to it. There's no question you have to be committed to it.
So, I mean, on that note about helping a business grow, it kind of leads me to chapter 8, and that was about Dean's Food, and I think that was my favorite chapter, first and foremost because you guys quoted Capadonna from Wu-Tang Clan, and it was a song, "Milk the Cow," and so the statement was, "Let us milk this cow the best way we know how." Right. So, I mean, anybody that knows Wu-Tang, like that's a signature line from one of Capadonna's albums. So, I want you to kind of talk about, like, first of all, like, why did y'all pick that particular song, and was it just more so like a play or a pun on the fact that you were talking about Dean Foods, which is related to milk?
Right. So Jeff, actually, my co-author, actually picked that particular that particular one to describe or to be utilized for that particular chapter. And I believe he had selected it in part because of the connection to Dean Foods specifically. We utilize Dean Foods as an example around really understanding your market, and developing, an understanding of your competition. And I think that we didn't hold back from utilizing all kinds of different genres, as you mentioned earlier. We really were looking for songs that we thought that really fit with the chapter. That's really that was our primary goal with that.
So let's just talk about speak no evil, right? So maybe we talked about the other evil so far, and I think that was definitely an interesting chapter sequentially based upon what you were talking about previously in the other chapters, right? And I think the main point of that one was that silence about telling the truth. So I want
Right.
you to kind of define what does that really mean for the end consumer.
Right. Well, let's start by just mentioning, Seth Godin wrote a book a number of years ago, saying marketers are liars. Right?
Mm,
And I think sometimes marketers, particularly with regard to advertising, there's a lot of people out there who don't think too highly of our profession,
mm,
unfortunately. And admittedly, just like any group, there's going to be people who are, sort of the bad apples, right? But I think most want to be honest in what they're sharing. But the idea with regard to speak no evil is really about understanding your brand, what it really authentically is, and sharing that in your communications to those you're trying to serve, that you're trying to convey your message to. And that could be not only what you share, but what are you not sharing? To be honest, I think includes things that maybe are not always the most positive. And so if we're really going to be honest about what our brand does and can do for those it's intended to serve, we need to be honest in all aspects of our brand. And if we're not, we are essentially being silent. That is the notion that we are conveying within the context of the book. So if we understand what our customers are looking for, we understand what our competitors are doing and what the marketplace is going to bear, then we come to the market with messages about what our brand is all about. And if we are going to be honest about it, we're going to be more successful because people are going to elevate our brand with regard to just buying the products and services that we're offering.
So, I mean, synopsis, the entire book is essentially about the process of overcoming these different hurdles, right? You're talking about
Right.
being blind to things, not being able to hear things, and not being able to speak things. And I think one of your favorite quotes was that you don't, I'm trying to remember the exact thing. You don't overcome challenges by making them smaller, but you make yourself bigger. And that's by John
Right.
Maxwell.
That's right.
So let's just talk about that for a minute. I mean, obviously, like that's your favorite quote for a reason. How much of that quote did you instill in defining this book? Because again, this book is all about problems and solutions, and about making that person become bigger with those solutions.
But well, I have to give you some props because you do your homework. That is one of my favorite quotes. Well, we can't make our challenges smaller. The challenges are what they are, and so if we to try to make them smaller is typically an effort that's wasted. Your investment of time and money to try to reduce challenges is oftentimes not going to see any fruit of that labor. And so alternatively, we have to do more. We have to be more. We have to be able to fulfill our potential,
Mm,
and in this case, as marketers and branders, to rise above those challenges.
mm,
So, customers, they're going to have lots of distractions, right? They're going to want to buy different things and try other things out. We have to fight through that. we have to work harder in terms of our product and service development to overcome that. We don't have much control over what our competitors can do or will do. We have to try to be proactive. If we need to, we'll be reactive, but we want to be proactive in the marketplace. We want to be first to market. We want to be able to understand what those needs are out there, and then we have to be better than our competition in terms of being honest about what our brand is, because and I think this has grown, particularly with millennial generation and now Gen Z. We have consumers who are just that much more attuned to what brands are associated with, right? In terms of causes, for example. And so consumers are they're much better educated. This is the most Gen Z is the most best educated population or generation, generation that probably has ever been the case. They're better informed, right? They will go online and check out your brand, et cetera, before they will go and buy something from you typically. And so being wiser from being a wiser consumer means we have to work harder as marketers and branders. And so we have to be very open, be very authentic. That's when they're going to appreciate wanting to be associated with our brand, right? They're going to follow us. Are they going to like our posts? Are they going to be supportive? Are they going to be part of the community? Are they going to be willing to participate in sort of a three-way dialogue, right? Not just with the brand, but with each other as customers of that particular brand. We as marketers and branders, we want all that, right? We want all that to happen. Well, we have to earn that. I think we have to earn that in a way that we didn't used to have to do. It just wasn't necessary. And we might have gotten a little lazy as marketers and branders for a while. That's not the case anymore. The demand is there. We have to rise to that occasion.
I mean, I think to your point, it's definitely 100% true. I mean, every single generation of marketers will change and adapt and grow. And I mean, technology is making it 10 times easier and harder at the same time, right? I mean, people's viewpoint and attention spans are way shorter than they've ever been, right? So getting that hold to them is going to be a lot harder than it ever was before. Which kind of leads me to like you earlier mentioned about how short the book was, and I know like you're a lover and a practicer of minimalism, so like was that part of something that you wanted to put into the book to make it that slim, or was it just you wanted to make sure the book was something that somebody could hold in their purse? Like where does that fit into play?
So I'd say I like to think of the book as being very word efficient essay. That's what I like to think of it. It's not necessarily a short book. It is an efficient word length. No, I think we said what we wanted to say, and we tried to say it in a way that would be where every word sort of matters. I think sometimes there are, we know there's attention span issues out there for people reading books. And so this does make it a lot easier when it's not a particularly long book. But we wanted to make it practical, as I made reference to before. I think when you're looking at it from that standpoint, let's make it as long as it needs to be and no longer. So we outlined the book first in terms of what we wanted to cover in each chapter. And then we identified sort of what we wanted to say in each of the chapters. And we made a couple of adjustments here and there when we were developing the book, certainly. But where we landed, I think, is a place where we wanted it to end up, where it's long enough to say what we wanted to say, and it's not longer than it needs to be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think to your point, I mean, it's a short book, but it's precise, it's detailed, it has value to it, and I think like going into chapter 10, it was a really solid chapter in the sense that the overall theme was releasing the tribe of truth tellers, and it kind of collectively brings all these other elements into the final chapter. So I want you to kind of talk about that and define that chapter 10, and why was that the last chapter versus essentially being the first chapter.
Right. Well, we wanted to bring it all together. We had a lot of introduction, I think, to this. We had a prologue. We had a pretty lengthy introduction. Even our first chapter, I would argue. Well, I'm not going to actually argue, but I would state that to some extent that's even a little bit of like an introduction too.
Mm,
So we do a lot of setup, and what we wanted to come to at the end is we wanted to close the gap because we made a promise at the outset. We made a promise really on the cover of the book
mm,
that a culture of clarity creates transformative success. We had to close that, right? We had to close out that loop. We had to fulfill our duty in that promise that we made. And so, as we look to end the book, we wanted to kind of put it all together.
mm,
If a company is addressing each of these different areas, if it's really understanding, knowing the customer, if it's really knowing the competition in the market, and it's really knowing its brand, if it's utilizing the three pillars that we talk about in the book: curiosity,
mm,
discovery, and honesty, it can bring about financial benefits.
mm.
It can help revenue. It can help profit margin. It can help market share. And so we wanted to end the book by fulfilling the promise that we set out right from the cover of the book: how a culture of clarity does bring, creating a culture of clarity rather brings and creates transformative success.
So, I mean, obviously, you're specializing in clarity in branding, right? So, I have this book in my hand, right? Ideally, who's your avatar that should then receive this book, open the book, and read it from front cover to back cover?
Right. So I really think the book is written for marketing and branding leaders. That's really what we had in mind when we set out to write the book. Um, we wanted to bring attention to research and insights. I mean, fundamentally, that's what the book is about. It's about elevating the importance within the organization, um, but it does take an investment.
Mhm,
But our point is that that investment will have such a significant return that it far outweighs the cost that's involved. And I think investment is an important word to utilize here, because when you make an investment, you are looking at what that return will be.
mhm,
When we look at it as something as a cost, then we're thinking about it like a cost center, and that's all you're never going to get anything out of it. And I think that's where our challenge is sometimes as researchers, is that so many people see research as a cost
mhm.
and don't recognize that it's actually an investment that can have a tremendous return. Um, and that's really what a primary reason why we wanted to write the book.
So, obviously, this is it's a bonus episode for Boss Uncaged, and it's more so targeted to our book club members. So, I want you to kind of talk to. So, I mean, we have people in that club that may be thinking about writing a book, and this is not your first book. This is your second book,
It is. Mhm.
and what you were describing was an investment. So, again, how much time did you guys invest in creating and developing this book versus the return that you are proposing to get?
Right, right. So thank you for SA. I think that's a really great question. And I think investment is a good word here as well, different context, but we invested a lot of time. And what I would say to people who are thinking about writing a book, um, you have to set aside that time. You have to allocate on a regular basis. I have I've had people come up to me and say, they're just like they're almost in awe of what we've accomplished in terms of writing a book, and now obviously, as you mentioned, our second book. What I've come to appreciate is it takes a disciplined approach. We took Jeff and I would meet twice a week for 2 hours at a time to work through the book. Now, we both individually did stuff in between, right, on the book as well, but we dedicated ourselves to spending 4 hours together each week for more than a year. It was probably about 13 or 14 months of weekly, twice a week meetings in order to get through the book. And I think anyone that wants to write something that they feel passionate about, which I felt a lot of passion around this topic essay. It meant a lot to me to get this book written and published and out there. It is, yeah. So I think it's some things people think writing a book is incredibly difficult. I think it can be less difficult if you take it in sort of bite-sized pieces, right? Where so many people look at the whole and say, oh, it's so much, looks like so much work. And there is a lot of work, no two ways about it. But we kind of broke it down like, let's just focus on this chapter. And we focus on a chapter for a certain amount of time, right? Until we feel like it's in a good place. Then we move on to another chapter, right? We just took it down to more manageable pieces in order to move it forward, right? And I was always like, when I would say to Jeff and say like, we're continuing to make progress. We're making progress. And sometimes it seems slower than other times, right? That's always going to be the case. It's never going to go at the pace you probably want it to maintain over the long term. But yeah, I think you got to break it down. I do think it's really important to set out an outline of what do you want to say and how do you want to say it, because I think that can really help make it feel like you have more control over the situation. And I think that made it a lot easier, right? So I made a reference earlier about our sort of book at a glance visuals that we have on the back cover of both books. We set that out, and that really helped a lot.
So I mean, I think that this kind of leads me to the next question. I mean, the outline to any book, and again, any author, including myself or you, like starting off with an outline is your guide to make sure you don't run off on a random tangent, and then you have a opening, a conclusion, a solid takeaway. All these things are for essentially individual authors, and then you have like the group authors. You know, maybe 15 to 20 people pool together and write a book, which is completely different than a single author. But then you and your partner are in the middle, right? I mean, obviously your thoughts are your thoughts, and you have your outline. His thoughts are his thoughts, and he has his outline. How the hell does that work with two separate types of mentalities and personalities? How do you choose which sentence or which paragraph goes before another and which chapter goes? Who has the final say?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's funny. I think when you are collaborating with one other person on a book that you're both putting out together, right? I think that you got to find the right collaborator, honestly. So Jeff and I have known each other since 2015. We had this very briefly. I'll just mention that we were introduced by a mutual friend. I was doing a lot of work with the younger generations at the time, and Jeff was working at an agency, and he was working on a project that was millennial focused, millennial consumer focused. And so I was brought in because I was focusing a lot of that in my business. We got together and we ended up with that research, we went and presented it to a conference about millennial consumers out in Napa Valley in September of 2015. And we came back from that conference, and then we did some webinar work together. Then we kind of parted our ways. We'd done what we were set out to do. Then we were kind of reintroduced to each other about 3 years ago, again by a mutual contact. And they wanted us to work on a project together this was an organization that's associated with the University of Cincinnati. called the Gehring Center. And they focus, a lot of their focus is on helping family owned businesses prosper. That's really kind of their main focus, if you will. And so they wanted us to work on this research project together, and we did do that, and it went well. But from that, Jeff and I both felt like we really enjoyed working together again. You know, what else can we be doing? And that's when we started an effort to reach out to some innovation teams at consumer product manufacturers, and that started our efforts on developing a pitch deck, which became that first book. But the reason I bring that up is Jeff and I have a very, we think similarly about research and insights and their importance in organizations. So we come with a bond, if you will, in how we think about that. We do have personality differences in the sense that Jeff is more, I would say, more creative. I'm more like stay in your lane. And it's funny because a number of times during the process of writing the book, he would make a reference to that, you know, and how well we worked together and how well we meshed. So I think we rarely really like argued a point. I think it was more about talking it out in terms of how we both would feel comfortable moving forward with that point. If there were any disagreements, and if there, you know, there probably were a few minor ones, but nothing that was really slowing us down much. But we were essentially writing most of the book together. And you know, now the stories in there are more from Jeff. He is I call him a storyteller. He's a very good storyteller. I'm like, no, you got to stay in your lane. So it kind of worked well from that standpoint. But a lot of the stories in the book are from experiences that Jeff had that seemed appropriate to include. I think it just worked well because of all those reasons. We both had a goal in mind. We both had a vision for what we wanted to do. We worked on executing on that vision as we worked on the book and saw it to its fruition. Most of the book is written by both of us combined. I will say that I wrote the prologue and he wrote the epilogue. So I started the book and he finished it from that standpoint. But most of the book is written by both of us.
So, I mean, who made the decision for Jeff to read the book? Because, I mean, it's his voice over on the book and the audio book.
Yes. Well, no one wants to hear my voice essay. No. So I mentioned earlier, I believe, that Jeff had written a book before, and he had done an audio book for Audible, audio version, of that book for Audible. He already had the equipment. He had gone through the process of recording it. He knew all the logistics as well. So he did the audio for the first book that we did. And so it just made sense for him to go ahead, and he's gotten very efficient at it. And having done it a few times now. And so we just stuck with that he would do the audio for this one as well.
I think that's pretty cool. I mean, the way I'm looking at you two, and again, I'm doing a visualize of what I'm seeing. Right, you guys are two surgeons, and it kind of leads me to a 5-star review that you guys got in the book. And the first line was talking about, would you trust a surgeon that did not look at an X-ray or an MRI or CT scans or tests to operate on you? But you guys are on the other side. I mean, you guys are really diving into the details behind the analytical data as the surgeons, and you're applying that information in a book to help someone essentially do their own surgery, technically.
Right. I mean, I think that's where you're trying to provide value with this book. We talk about being practical, but we wanted to provide a lot of value. And at least theoretically, people could take what we've done and implement it. They might have the resources internally from a personnel standpoint to do it. But what we typically find when we provide sort of that sort of free consulting, if you will. I mean, yes, the book was $1.99 at the time it went out. It's like $3.99, I think now. It's technically not free, but it's pretty low cost, right? But whenever you're essentially sort of giving away information, we recognize that people will take it. They may see value in it, but they may also need help in implementing it. And so, yeah, there might be some people who just take it and run with it, but we think there's a number of people who it'll resonate with, but they may not have the resources internally or the time to do it themselves, and they may need help in implementing it.
So to take what you just said, or to regurgitate it, I mean, essentially you're using the book as a lead magnet, right? I mean, obviously somebody could take the book and run
Yes.
with it, but if they don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
how to execute it, then that's when your clarity company then steps in. So that leads me to our next question. I mean, do you think any business owner, entrepreneur, startup founder, or small business owner generally, should they all have books that's written about what they do and tell some kind of stories of what they've been through?
I think it can be very helpful. It's good from creating awareness and exposure, right? I think it builds credibility because now they know where your area of expertise is, what you know about, and you're sharing that knowledge. I think people respond to that well now, and there's an expectation that people will learn from you without spending much money, at least initially, in order to generate some engagement with you and your brand. And so I think the expectation in the marketplace has gone bigger with providing, essentially like free or very inexpensive consulting. And so I do think that it can be very helpful. It admittedly took a while before. I mean, I was one of those people who wanted to write a book for a long time, right? And I was much like some of these people who are now coming up to me and saying, that they, wow, I wish I could write a book, right?
Yeah.
I was one of those people for a long time, and that's why finding somebody like I found with Jeff, who's obviously become not only a colleague but a friend. Um, we just work so well together that it's made it so much, I'm sure, so much easier. Um, but yes, I do think that they should consider it. There are so many more ways now to get a book written than there used to be. You made a reference essay, I think, early in our discussion about there are folks who help get a bunch of folks together on a project, writing like one chapter a piece. I'm based in Cincinnati. We have someone that does that on a pretty regular basis. It's all thematic, right? They have like they're utilizing this idea of fusion. So like they've had a series um, on fusion in different categories like leadership. So they'll get like 8 to 10 different people writing a chapter who operate in the leadership space, or sales fusion was another one. So folks but they're looking at different perspectives, different angles on sales or leadership, for example. Um, that I think makes it a lot easier for people to be able to be considered authors when all they have to focus on is sort of their specific expertise and only doing one chapter.
I think that's a hell of a philosophy and the utilizing of the word fusion. So I want you to kind of think outside the box. I know you're a creative mind as well. So if your book, right, your book can be in first place, second place, or third place. There's no central hierarchy, but we're talking about reading order. What other two books would you like to associate with your book, and what order would they be in?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. What would I like to be associated with? Um, well, I mentioned Seth Godin's "Marketers Are Liars," so I think part of our book does kind of try to offset that, right? And we don't want to. I don't think most marketers want to be liars. I think we want to be authentic, and I think that I think the market now demands us to be more authentic and honest in our messaging about the products and services we offer in the marketplace. Um, I'd probably put up there. Well, who wouldn't want to be associated with someone that's been as successful as Seth Godin, right? If I thought of another book, um, Yeah, a good question. I'm not sure. If because we didn't go in trying to be anything but
Oh, of
what
course
we
not.
are, right?
Yeah.
And so, admittedly, I hadn't thought about this at all. In all
I mean,
those
think of
months
it
that we're
from the
working on it.
standpoint of like a prequel, right? I mean, would you want someone to read Seth's book first or your book first before reading the other?
I probably want them to read Seth's book first, and yeah, about marketers or liars, and then us first to kind of debate that a little bit, right? We're trying to offset that idea
Mhm.
because I don't think it serves marketers and branders very well, right? If we're being considered liars out there. Um, so yeah, definitely would want them to read Seth Godin's book first. Plus, he's a little better known than we are out there in the world of book authors. But yeah, I mean, nothing comes immediately to mind. If I think about the other two areas, if we're, um, whether we're talking about customers or competition, um, I think ultimately in order to be really successful, I think you just have to be focused in all those three areas.
Mhm.
I think they're all going to be important, and um, yeah, I don't. Unfortunately, nothing immediately comes to mind.
So let's spin that question off. I mean, obviously, if you had to pick five authors, right? We know Seth will be one of them. We know John Maxwell will be another one. So who is your other top three within those five?
Yeah, so I'm a big supporter and follower, if you will, of Tony Robbins.
Mhm.
I think that he's been a relatively prolific author. He's written several books now, lots of different areas. I would definitely say that one. I think that when we talk about honesty in particular, essay, I'm going to go with a book that's not affiliated typically with business, but it has everything to do with vulnerability, and that's Brene Brown's "The Gifts of Imperfection," one of her first books. Um, that was a book that really had a major impact on me and my life, and realizing as an entrepreneur and a business owner that I needed to be more vulnerable. Um, when I started to become more vulnerable, I became bolder in my mindset and my actions with the business. I mean, I would say 5 years ago, yeah, I wanted to write a book, never thought I was going to do it. So yeah, think about writing books, getting on stages and speaking as a public speaker. Um, those are all related to being inspired by that book. And I think entrepreneurs really would gain a lot um, from reading that book and really embodying what she was conveying. That vulnerability is really about courage, and we have to be brave in order to move our businesses forward. Um, we have to be, sort of badasses, right? To coin a term that we hear frequently from someone that we both know.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that, like I said, not typically associated with business specifically, but I think it has to do with life, and it has to do with being, I think, having a more effective and more successful life.
Cool. Cool. So in closing, I got a humorous question for you, and it's going to lead into you telling me a story, right?
Okay.
Right. Why did you not pick your nickname Danny Gavitt as your pen name? And where did that nickname even come from?
Yeah, sure. So, so you mentioned about me being involved in improv. So I've been involved in Improv Cincinnati, obviously a local improv theater group. I started in the fall of 2018. So I've been doing it for a while now. Still learning, always going to be learning to do improv better, but and be more effective improviser. But One of the elective classes that they offered was one on stand-up comedy. And I jumped at the chance to try that out. I was being vulnerable, right? I mean, even doing improv, there's a lot of vulnerability with it because you're on stage. But improv is a little easier than stand-up just from the standpoint of you're usually up there with other people. And improv is based fundamentally on this yes and kind of approach, and you don't deny, you just accept, and it becomes the new reality of that particular scene on stage. But stand up, you're up there by yourself. You have nobody supporting you, and it's all about the relationship with the audience. And so I took this elective, and when Improv Sensei does these shows, and I'm certain other improv groups that have classes end their class schedule on what they call a showcase, which is essentially a show. Usually it's with friends and family. They usually don't make people who attend pay because you're you're relatively new, you're still a student. But it was one of the most impactful times that I can recall in my life, as being on stage, telling jokes as a stand-up comedian in that showcase. And when I left that, I wanted to do some more, but it was right before the pandemic hit, right? And so I started taking classes online through Greg Dean, who used to be a comedian out in the West Coast. He's been a teacher of stand-up for like 30 or 40 years, a long time. And he has a group that teaches stand-up online. They have some techniques that they can share, they can teach you and such. And so through the pandemic, a good portion of the pandemic, particularly first year and a half, I was taking classes online. I was doing stand-up showcases online. And I was utilizing the name Denny Gavin for my stand-up. I thought it was basically, setting up a different persona for the stand-up. And so I kind of doubled down on it for that effort. So yes, I have. I think there's a Facebook page now. I haven't done much stand-up lately. I've really doubled down more recently on improv. It just, I think it's kind of where I'm at on my improv journey. I do intend to return to doing some stand-up on a more regular basis, but that's where Denny Gavin came from, was basically developing a stand-up persona that I would use, and I'd just be known as that on stage for stand-up comedy. Yeah, really never have associated with the business. So as an author, yeah, I wanted to use my name. Obviously, I'm trying to make the connection for people, my name with my brand, with the book. And so just went with my actual name.
And you got a new nickname as well now, so from now on I'm going to call you the Clarity Boss, because
Clarity Boss. Well,
yeah.
Essay, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I've had people calling me Mr. Clarity a lot lately, it seems. That's okay, because I think particularly when you're a solopreneur, right, and you're developing a brand, you want to be associated with that brand, and so I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. That works for me.
Cool, very cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking some time out your busy schedule today to deliver this information and talk about your new book. If you guys have not remembered the book, it's The Three Wise Monkeys by Dennis, better known as the Clarity Boss from now on. But I mean, obviously, what do you have to say in closing to our listeners?
Yeah, so I would encourage folks certainly to purchase the book, because it's still only $3.99, so it's very affordable. I think you gain some understanding about why knowing your customers, knowing your competition, knowing your brand really can help your business.
Mhm.
So very, very small investment, not only of money, but also small investment of time. Probably can be read in about an hour and a half. So and as I'm sure you realize, SA, it's not a technical book, right? It's a pretty straightforward read. We don't use too many big terms, and when we do use terms, we define them for you, as you made a reference to earlier. So we wanted everyone to understand what we were saying and what it all meant. But I think that I'd encourage entrepreneurs to keep at it. Even if it looks like it's challenging for them. I've been at this for almost 13 years, and yeah, there have been times where it's been really challenging. I started the business when we were in the Great Recession. I'm working through obviously a pandemic now. I figure if I can get through those two things, I'm going to be fine, right?
Yeah.
You just have to keep at it. You keep improving, right? Keep progressing the business, and don't be hesitant to ask for help. I think one of the things that I have really come to appreciate is, hey, there's certain things I am good at and know something about, and then there's other areas like, for me, it's like accounting and finance. I need people to help me there, right? It's not my thing. Don't be shy or afraid to ask for help where you need help, because very few of us, I think, are able to do it all on our own. We need help, and being willing to be vulnerable and willing to admit that. There's no shame in that. It's about what's going to be good for the business.
I think in closing, that's a solid statement. And I mean, obviously, any entrepreneur, if you don't know how to ask for help, and that's probably why you're probably stuck where you are right now. I mean, you can't do anything by yourself. You have to figure out who does it better than you, and that's why you always hear most successful people say they always hire someone that's smarter than they are.
Yeah. The only other thing I would say that I think is also something that's just very strong, something I feel very strongly about, is investing in yourself.
Mhm.
I've been big on investing in myself, over the time, and I've become a better business owner. I've become a better entrepreneur as a result of those investments. Um, don't shy away from improving yourself in some way that improves your business along with it. Invest in yourself, because that's typically a good investment.
Hmm. Very solid advice, man. Well, I definitely appreciate you being on the show today, Dennis, man, and I look forward to. I know you're not going to stop with book number two. Book writing becomes addictive, so let me know when book number three comes out.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity, SA. I appreciate it.
Anytime. S.A. Grant, over and out.